Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes for the fourth time. The Bills will try to end what is fast becoming a postseason curse.
If I'm Josh Allen, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I'm cutting off my phone. I'm locked and loaded and ready to explode.
Last week, we saw the most anticipated game of the season between the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. The two leading MVP candidates battled it out, and ultimately, Buffalo would come out on top. But the real reason that this game was so hyped up wasn't just because of who was throwing the ball on both sides. The game was hyped up because the winner would be invited to the Arrowhead Invitational with a chance to topple the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Games like this are what you play for. The top two seeds in the AFC, both who looked absolutely unstoppable heading into this, in a heavyweight matchup for a spot in the Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs dynasty versus a Buffalo Bills team looking to win their first ever Super Bowl. And it doesn't get better than this. Before we get into this game recap and Super Bowl preview, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to get the latest NFL news to your device. We've been double and triple uploading as head coaches were getting hired, and it's only a matter of time before we see Tyreek Hill or DK Metcalf potentially get traded, so you don't want to miss that. Now that we get all that out of the way, ever since I've gotten this sponsorship, I've been trying to figure out a way to game the system so I can earn my subscribers money, and I finally did it this past week. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you all the messages I've been receiving over the past few days as a result of all the people making money with my picks. I have a model that has exponentially increased our hit rate, and if you don't believe me, just look at my DMs. I mean, people have been blowing up my DMs with all the money they've been making. We made thousands of dollars on Prize Picks this past week, and they're giving us one more free square for the Super Bowl. All Patrick Mahomes needs is one passing yard. I'm gonna post my play on my Instagram story at the Flight Mike or Snapchat Flight Mike Snap once the game gets closer. But use my promo code Mikerophone when you sign up for Prize Picks to get $50 when you make a play of $5 or more. And let's make some money off of this big game. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? For the last 5 years, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills have had arguably the greatest rivalry in the AFC and maybe even in the entire league. And that rivalry grew even stronger when they met in the AFC Championship this year. Since 2020, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes have led the two best teams in the AFC and have met numerous times. But coming into this game, the result varied based on the stakes. Buffalo and Kansas City had met 5 times in the regular season, with Buffalo winning 4 of those games, including their victory over Kansas City this season, which I'll talk about later in this video. However, in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs are undefeated in 3 matchups against Josh Allen and Buffalo, ending their season every single time they'd face off in a win-or-go-home game, including their historic divisional round game from 2021, where Kansas City won in overtime after the most insane final 2 minutes I've ever seen. This truly is the game that kickstarted everything, and it genuinely might be the greatest football game of all time. When the final 2-minute warning of that game hit, Buffalo had the ball down 5 looking to score and take the lead. So what did Josh Allen do? He found a wide open Gabe Davis down the seam for a touchdown. Just a few plays later, Buffalo would find themselves watching Tyreek Hill run through their entire defense for a 64-yard go-ahead touchdown. You'd think at this point that would win the Chiefs the game, right? But Josh Allen would then lead his team down the field, throwing a go-ahead touchdown with 13 seconds left. That was too much time for Patrick Mahomes, as he would get his team into field goal range in those 13 seconds to send the game into overtime, which the Chiefs would ultimately score first in. Those 2 minutes of game time was arguably the greatest football I've ever seen, and it even caused the NFL to implement a rule change so that both teams would get a chance to score in overtime in the playoffs. Ever since this game, fans have expected nothing but elite football from both of these teams, and they have yet to disappoint. In the last 2 seasons alone, they've had multiple games that have opened eyes, including their divisional round game last year and their Week 11 game in which Buffalo ended Kansas City's undefeated season. Last year, the stakes were a bit different than their AFC Championship game this year. The winner still had to go to Baltimore. Kansas City wasn't a 15-win team, and Josh Allen wasn't an MVP candidate. And still they were neck and neck, and the results showed. It came down to the final minutes and ended when Tyler Bass missed a last-minute field goal that would have tied the game. It's easy to say that if Bass had made that field goal, then Buffalo would have won, but I don't think that's the case. Patrick Mahomes would have had a minute and a half and 2 timeouts to drive down the field and untie the game. And we saw what he was able to do in 13 seconds. So who's to say that he wouldn't do that with 10 times the time left on the clock? Regardless, Kansas City toppled Buffalo and went on to win their 2nd straight Super Bowl. And the reason that this year's game was so so highly touted is not only because of Kansas City being on the verge of a three-peat, but because Buffalo was the only team to defeat them this season.
The reality is this: Joe Brady and the Bills anticipated everything that Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs would do, and that's the main reason why they won the football game.
Outside of a Week 18 game where Kansas City sat their starters, they won every single game they played this regular season, except for the one against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Kansas City came into this game looking absolutely unstoppable, with one of the best defenses in the entire NFL, and the ability to win every close game that they were in. Some even called it black magic, but it didn't matter to the Buffalo Bills. They came out swinging. The most the Chiefs ever led by during this game was 1 point, and that was only because Tyler Bass missed an extra point. After a James Cook touchdown on Buffalo's first drive, every time Kansas City scored, Buffalo would answer right back. You could tell that this was personal. They would keep the Chiefs on their toes, but facing Superman finally caught up to Steve Spagnuolo's defense. With just over 2 minutes left in the game, Buffalo was up by 2, but the Chiefs had Buffalo backed against a wall, forcing a 4th and 2 from their own 27-yard line. The problem was they forgot who they were going up against. Josh Allen would tuck the ball and bowl through the entire Kansas City defense, putting the game away in arguably the best play of the year in the 2024 NFL season, handing the Kansas City Chiefs their first loss since Christmas of 2023. The Chiefs had finally been toppled, but if we're being honest, it should have happened long before Week 11. In Week 1, Kansas City was an Isaiah likely toe away from losing to the Ravens. Then there were a questionable Cincinnati pass interference call late in the game on 4th and 16 from losing in Week 2. The refs also missed a pass interference call on Kansas City in their Week 3 game against the Atlanta Falcons, which would have left them 0-3. Then the week before the Bills game, when everyone was clamoring for the Chiefs to lose a game, the Denver Broncos had a chance. Will Lutz would line up for a 35-yard field goal to take the lead as time expired, but somehow, someway, Chiefs linebacker Leo Chanel would block the Denver kick, saving Kansas City's undefeated season by a fingertip. They looked beatable in almost every single game they played up until this point, but they continued to find a way to get it done. Luck or not, they couldn't lose. So once they lost, people finally said that the Kansas City Chiefs season was a major fluke and that they had finally been figured out. But everybody that said that stuff forgot one thing: it wasn't the playoffs yet.
The Buffalo Bills have won 4 straight in the regular season against the Kansas City Chiefs, though. The stickler, the issue, the problem to that is the postseason, when all the chips are in and everything is for everything, they have lost every single game.
The Chiefs may have looked beatable all season long, and Patrick Mahomes may have had a below average season to his standards, but none of that matters once we hit January. Once the playoffs begin, the Kansas City Chiefs become the heavy favorite in every game they play, until proven otherwise. Going into this game, the last time the Chiefs lost a playoff game was the 2022 AFC Championship against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. They had won 7 straight playoff games after that loss, including 2 Super Bowls. So no matter how their regular season went, Buffalo was going to have to be worried about them once the playoffs came around, especially in Arrowhead. Patrick Mahomes seems to be a magician in these types of games. Travis Kelce had recorded 14 consecutive playoff games with 70+ receiving yards, and only 2 of those 7 playoff games were played on the road, both of which were played last year, one in Buffalo and one in Baltimore. As a matter of fact, those 2 games are the only 2 road playoff games Patrick Mahomes has ever played in. That's how dominant he and the Chiefs have been ever since he was drafted. And still, it seems as though people believe that Kansas City will lose almost every game they play in January. Just last week, some people had predicted that the disappointing Houston Texans would beat the Chiefs after their win against the Chargers in the wildcard round, simply because they thought that the Chiefs were frauds after their regular season performance. Then they got beat, and it never really felt that close.
This version of the Bills is built to take on this version of the Chiefs.
People forget just how good the Kansas City Chiefs are, and people forget just how made for the playoffs they are. But if any team was going to beat them in January, it was going to be the Bills. This was always the headline game. As good as Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens were, the game that everybody wanted to see was always Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. Did Josh Allen finally get it done? Or did Patrick Mahomes continue his legacy, proving that Allen can't beat him when it counts? That's what everyone was excited to find out, and we finally got our answer. Buffalo would start this heavyweight clash with the ball, and the game almost started off hot, as Josh Allen threw the ball to 2 Chiefs on back-to-back plays, but Kansas City would end up dropping both picks. They forced a punt, but as we saw in Buffalo's game last week, turnovers are king, so Buffalo lucked out, and compared to the alternative, Allen would have to play much better than he did on the first drive if they wanted a chance to beat these guys, especially considering what happened when Patrick Mahomes got the ball. He, alongside their run game, would execute a near-perfect drive, going up 7-0 early after a Kareem Hunt touchdown. It was a terrible start for the Bills on both ends, but Josh Allen started down by 7 last week also, and we saw what happened there. So the game was just getting started at this point. Buffalo did end up scoring on their next drive, but it wouldn't be a touchdown after Josh Allen would drop a snap, which would force Buffalo to attempt to convert a 3rd and long, which they would fail. Allen would play very sloppy on his first 2 drives, and it really wasn't like him. Tyler Bass would then make a 53-yard field goal to put them within 4 early in the game, which just so happened to be the longest postseason field goal in Arrowhead Stadium history. But ultimately, it wouldn't matter if they couldn't get a stop. That task would get much harder because early during Kansas City's next drive, Bills standout quarterback Christian Benford would be carted to the locker room after being in concussion protocol all week leading up to the game. This is a really tough loss for the Buffalo secondary, which is a unit that's already playing without Taylor Rapp for this game, but the Bills couldn't concede. The next play, they would force and recover a huge fumble, but they would shoot themselves in the foot once again. Unfortunately, they would be called for an offside penalty beforehand, so it didn't matter anyway. The Bills just couldn't catch a break. That is until they recovered a fumble later in the drive anyway on a miscommunication between Patrick Mahomes and Kareem Hunt on a handoff. This was Kansas City's first turnover since November, and it gave Buffalo some much needed momentum. All this action, and it wasn't even the second quarter yet. Buffalo would end up capitalizing on that momentum in the best way possible, converting on multiple huge 3rd and long situations, and eventually finding the end zone on an impressive James Cook rush to take the lead. But unfortunately, that momentum that Buffalo had didn't last very long, as Kansas City would leave yet another timely drive during a 4th down conversion and a questionable face mask call that gave the Chiefs the ball at the 11-yard line, resulting in an Xavier Worthy diving touchdown at the pylon to take the lead right back. The first half was already so electric, and it got even crazier following a Kansas City Chiefs stop, followed by a deep punt return that had Arrowhead shaking, which was then followed by the best reception of Xavier Worthy's young career. You could hear this Arrowhead crowd all the way in St. Louis. Watch.
If it holds up, it's 26 yards.
Of course, this drive was going to end in points, and those points came by the way of a Patrick Mahomes rollout, taking a double-digit lead with 2 minutes to go in the half. Now, pressure was mounting on the Buffalo Bills because the Kansas City Chiefs get the ball to begin the second half, so they needed points ASAP. Josh Allen would lead a 2-minute drill down the field, ending in an absolutely insane throw and reception to Mac Hollins in the end zone. Kansas City would at least stop Buffalo on their 2-point attempt, maintaining a 5-point lead, and ending what may have been the best half of football that we've seen in these playoffs. The second half started off with Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs driving down the field yet again, and it looked like we were going to see another methodical scoring drive to hinder Buffalo Bills fans' hopes. But Matt Milano would take over, sacking Patrick Mahomes on 3rd and long, effectively pushing Kansas City out of field goal range and forcing them to punt. What a perfect way to start the half if you're Buffalo, and somehow it would get even better. It took almost 8 minutes, but Buffalo would score. James Cook would have this epic touchdown where he would dive over the goal line, reaching out for the lead. The man was hit from multiple angles, and he still was able to get the job done. This is after a drive where Buffalo would only pass the ball once. Yet another failed 2-point conversion would keep their lead at 1, but they had gotten the lead back nonetheless. Now, the third quarter could not have gone any worse for the Kansas City Chiefs. By the time they switched sides, Buffalo had stopped them twice, taken the lead, and had possession of the ball, but it still was just a 1-point game, and anything could happen in a 1-point game. Kansas City thought they caught a break on a Josh Allen 4th down fumble, but Buffalo would ultimately come up with the ball, extending their possession. Luckily, they get another chance to stop a Josh Allen 4th down run, and this time they would be successful, causing a turnover on downs and taking over in prime Mahomes time. And this is something you don't want to see if you're a Buffalo Bills fan, because Patrick Mahomes would absolutely show out, making the next drive look easy, absolutely being surgical, carving up the Buffalo Bills defense, and eventually running the ball in, causing yet another lead change. This is the part of every game where Patrick Mahomes leads his team to wins, especially in January, and to nobody's surprise, we were seeing it again. However, it wasn't over just yet. In absolutely familiar fashion, Josh Allen answered right back, taking his turn carving up the opposing defense and finding Curtis Samuel in the back of the end zone on 4th and goal to tie the game up with 6 minutes to go. This game was really starting to feel like the classic from 2021. Buffalo would hold Kansas City to 3 on their next drive, getting the the ball with 3.5 minutes remaining and setting up for another historic finish. What happened next was absolutely insane. Allen and the Bills faced a 4th and 5 with 2 minutes left, needing to convert for a real chance at winning this game, pulling out his best blitz in the most dire situation, causing Josh Allen to throw up a prayer, and that prayer had almost been answered by Dalton Kincaid. Unfortunately for Buffalo, though, almost doesn't count. The Chiefs would regain possession with the lead, needing to run out the clock to buy themselves a ticket to Super Bowl 59, and as you guys know, that's exactly what would happen. They got the first downs they needed, and for the 4th time in a row, they toppled the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. The game was the absolute classic that everyone expected it to be, and it only grew the rivalry between these two dominant teams. Josh Allen's season ends in disappointment, as Buffalo has to wait another year for a chance to win their first Super Bowl. Meanwhile, the Kansas City Chiefs are the first team to make 3 straight Super Bowls after winning the first 2, giving themselves an opportunity to become the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls in a Super Bowl rematch from 2 seasons ago against the Philadelphia Eagles. The better team won, and regardless of what everybody thinks of them, the Chiefs did it again. They continue to own the AFC, and until somebody beats them, I'm convinced they'll never be stopped. Despite the loss, Buffalo will obviously be back, and they'll be stronger than ever. I fully expect to see round 5 next year. My heart goes out to Buffalo Bills fans because each and every season you guys are so dominant in the regular season, and in the playoffs Josh Allen always makes the right moves. Even in this particular matchup, Sean McDermott and Josh Allen consistently made the right decisions, and it wasn't incompetence that screwed over the Buffalo Bills at the end of the day. It was just 2 of the greatest football minds going up against each other and getting outmatched once again. Joe Brady and Sean McDermott are 2 of the greatest football minds in the NFL. Joe Brady was a frontrunner for many head coaching gigs this offseason, and Sean McDermott is a very respected defensive mind. But at the end of the day, they got outmatched by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I would be crushed if I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, especially considering what they had to deal with in the early 90s. But at the end of the day, although we saw the same Super Bowl 2 years ago, things are significantly different this time around. Saquon Barkley is now on the Philadelphia Eagles. Patrick Mahomes' wide receiver core looks significantly different. So let me know in the comment section down below, who do you think's gonna win the Super Bowl? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.